Okay, so get ready, because today we're diving deep into a topic that blends science and faith.
Oh, very interesting.
It's the concept of scientific miracles in the Quran.
Okay.
We've got a whole bunch of articles and research papers,
Yeah.
really fascinating stuff, and I think you'll find this one pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah, this is a topic that has fascinated people for centuries, really gets to the heart of how we understand the world.
Exactly. So let's just start with like the basics,
Yeah.
How do these sources actually define scientific miracles?
So they're generally presented as, events that seem to just defy the natural order.
Right.
And they're often used to support like the claims of prophets across different religions.
Hmm.
So it's this idea that, certain occurrences just can't be explained by science alone and therefore point to some kind of divine intervention.
And in the case of the Quran, the text itself is considered a miracle by Muslims.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
The argument is that it contains scientific insights that were revealed way before modern science, caught up. Right. It's seen as proof of the divine origin of the Quran and a source of wonder and inspiration for believers.
Okay, so let's get into some specific examples. One that caught my eye was this verse that states that life originates from water.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. Very simple statement, but it links to some really profound scientific truths.
Right.
I mean, we know that water is like completely essential for all life as we know it.
Yep.
Most organisms are composed, mostly of water, anywhere from 50 to 90%.
Wow.
Even at the cellular level, cytoplasm, which is like the basic substance of a cell, is about 80% water.
So the Quran is highlighting this fundamental role of water in life
Right.
centuries before we had, microscopes and a deep understanding of biology.
Exactly.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is, and it raises some interesting questions about the nature of knowledge and revelation.
Yeah.
Like, how could those insights have been known back then?
Okay, here's one I'm curious about. The Quran mentions ants speaking. Obviously, we don't see ants chatting like us.
Yeah.
So what's the deeper meaning here?
This is where it gets really fascinating. While we might not take it literally, modern science shows us this incredible complexity of ant societies. They communicate through these intricate chemical signals.
Oh, wow.
They've got sophisticated division of labor, and their collective intelligence, helps them do these amazing things.
So it's like the Quran is recognizing the remarkable nature of ant communication, even though it's not, in a language we understand.
Exactly. It invites us to think about the diversity of communication and intelligence in nature.
Yeah.
Going beyond our very human-centered perspective.
Another one that stood out was the verse describing the spider's house as the most fragile.
Oh, yes. That connects to the delicate structure of spider webs. They're incredibly strong for their weight,
Yeah.
but so easily destroyed. It's a beautiful metaphor, I think, for the temporary nature of life.
Right.
And the delicate balance of the natural world.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. The Quran says everything's created in pairs. And the sources point out that this goes beyond, male and female.
Right. It's a bigger idea that includes opposites in all forms, like light and darkness, life and death, land and sea. It suggests, this fundamental duality at play in the universe.
Yeah.
A sort of cosmic dance of these opposing forces
Wow.
that create balance and harmony.
It's like the Quran's telling us to see the world in a more, holistic way.
Yeah.
Recognizing how everything's interconnected.
I think that's a beautiful interpretation. It challenges us to think beyond our limited human perspective and appreciate the intricate tapestry of creation.
Another example of this idea of interconnectedness is the verse describing layered darkness in the ocean depths.
Yeah, this lines up with what we know scientifically about how light is absorbed in water. As you go deeper into the ocean, different wavelengths of light are absorbed.
Okay.
And it creates this gradual change from light to dark.
Oh.
At a certain depth, it's pitch black, a world we can only explore with special equipment.
It's like the Quran is hinting at this hidden world way before we had the tech to explore it.
It definitely sparks the imagination, and it shows how the Quran engages with the natural world, encouraging observation and contemplation.
Let's switch gears a bit and talk about the verse mentioning a sperm drop determining a fetus's sex.
Okay.
This seems to line up with modern genetics.
Absolutely. Today we know that chromosomes determine sex.
Yeah.
And specifically, it's the Y chromosome that makes the difference. The Quranic verse even though it doesn't use, scientific terms, seems to grasp this essential idea
Right.
that something within the sperm decides the sex of the child.
Again, it's remarkable how these ancient texts seem to kind of foreshadow scientific discoveries from centuries later.
Yeah, it's a source of wonder, for sure, and a reminder that we're always uncovering new things about the world around us.
Okay, here's another one that I find fascinating. The Quranic verse describing a barrier between seas.
Oh, interesting.
It almost sounds like it's talking about something like invisible, keeping those waters separate.
And that's exactly what we see in nature.
Really?
This phenomenon called a halocline. It's a zone where water with different saltiness meet.
Okay.
But they don't mix easily because of their different densities and temperatures. You might see this where, like, a river flows into the ocean.
Right.
Or even in underwater caves where fresh water meets salt water.
So the Quran's not just describing this visual separation of water, it's hinting at these unseen forces that govern nature.
Exactly, and that's what's so intriguing about these scientific miracles. They invite us to think about the deeper layers of reality,
Yeah.
these unseen forces and principles that shape our world.
And maybe the most striking example of this is the verse describing the universe's origin as smoke.
Oh, yes.
Sounds almost poetic, but it also connects to the scientific Big Bang Theory, right?
It does. The Big Bang Theory describes the early universe as super hot, super dense, like a cosmic soup of particles. And this Quranic description of the universe coming from smoke seems to fit with that.
It's like the Quran is offering a glimpse into the very beginning of time, a moment that science is still trying to fully grasp.
It's a powerful image, inspires awe and wonder. And it highlights how faith and science can have a conversation, each offering a unique view on the mysteries of the universe.
Okay, let's talk about the Quran's description of fetal development.
Okay.
It uses terms like nutfa, alaka, and muga.
Yes.
These seem to match up with specific stages of, embryological development.
Right. So nutfa refers to that first drop of fluid,
Yeah.
which we now understand as the fertilized egg. Alaka literally means something that clings, which aligns with how the embryo attaches to the uterine wall.
Okay.
And mudga describes something like a chewed substance, which matches the embryo's look at a later stage.
It's like the Quran's providing a detailed account of how human life develops, aligning with what modern embryology has shown us.
It really does show how the Quran engages with the natural world
Yeah.
and how it recognizes these intricate processes of creation.
And it's not just human life that the Quran talks about. It also mentions the expansion of the universe, a concept only confirmed by science in the 20th century.
Yeah, the Quran clearly says that God is expanding the universe.
Wow.
A pretty profound statement that came way before modern cosmology. It's another example of how the Quran seems to anticipate scientific discoveries.
It really makes you think about the connection between ancient wisdom and modern science.
Yeah.
Are they completely separate, or is there a deeper link?
That's a question that's fascinated scholars and theologians forever.
Right.
And exploring these scientific miracles helps bridge that gap. It encourages us to see how faith and reason can potentially be in harmony.
Okay, let's move on to another fascinating one. The Quranic description of mountains as pegs.
Oh, interesting.
It's a strong image, but what's the scientific connection?
Well, now we understand how important mountains are in stabilizing the Earth's crust. They're like anchors, preventing, seismic instability and helping to control geological processes. The Quranic description, even though it uses poetic language, seems to grasp this important function of mountains.
So it's not just about the mountains being there, it's about their deeper role in keeping the earth balanced.
Exactly. And this reminds us that the Quran often works on different levels of meaning.
Right.
There's the literal, observable stuff, but also a deeper symbolic layer that invites us to reflect and think more deeply.
And speaking of multiple layers of meaning, let's look at how the Quran describes birds in flight.
Okay.
What's the scientific significance there?
So the Quran uses the word amsaka to describe how birds are held in the sky.
Interesting.
Now, scientifically, we understand that birds fly through this complex interaction of aerodynamics, wing shape, muscle control.
Right.
But the Quranic term suggests something beyond just physics, like a sense of divine providence or guidance.
It's like the Quran is acknowledging the wonder of flight and those intricate things that make it possible,
Right.
but also hinting at a deeper, maybe spiritual dimension to it.
Exactly. That interplay of the scientific and the spiritual is what makes exploring these scientific miracles so fascinating.
Hmm. Okay, so we've covered quite a few examples of these scientific
You
correlations,
have.
but the sources also mention linguistic miracles in the Quran, like specific words and repetitions
Mm.
that are seen as miraculous for their precision and the layers of meaning they hold. Can you give us an example?
Sure. One that stands out is how the words dunya, world, and akhira, afterlife, appear the same number of times in the Quran.
Oh, that's a really interesting observation. What do scholars say about the significance of that?
They see it as a deliberate balance, highlighting the importance of both this life and the next.
Mm.
The Quran doesn't favor one over the other.
Right.
It stresses that both are connected and that we need to live righteously to prepare for the afterlife.
It's really fascinating how something as simple as word choice can point to these deeper meanings and theological concepts.
Yeah.
And speaking of deeper layers,
Mhm.
the sources also talk about mathematical miracles in the Quran. Can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely. So this refers to the idea that there are these numerical patterns, these balances within the Quran
Okay.
that point to like a divine design.
Okay.
For example, some scholars have pointed out that the number of times prayer is mentioned lines up perfectly with the 5 daily prayers in Islam.
It's almost like a hidden code within the text, reinforcing the importance of these practices.
Right.
What other examples of these mathematical miracles do the sources bring up?
Well, another interesting observation is the specific order of chapters and verses.
Okay.
Some scholars think the order and structure have mathematical significance
Right.
and reveal hidden meanings.
Hmm.
It's a complex area of study, involves analyzing the numerical values of letters, words, and verses.
So there's a whole world of numerology and symbolism waiting to be discovered in the Quran.
There certainly is. And while these interpretations are debated quite a bit, they add another layer of intrigue to studying the Quran and show just how multifaceted this text is. But it's important to recognize that this idea of scientific miracles in the Quran
Yeah.
has also faced skepticism.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
What are some of the counterarguments from the sources?
Well, some critics say that interpreting these verses as scientific facts is kind of like confirmation bias.
Okay.
They say that people are reading modern scientific knowledge into these ancient texts.
So instead of seeing them as predicting scientific discoveries, they're suggesting we're just interpreting them based on what we already know.
Exactly. They stress that the Quran is primarily a religious text, not a scientific one.
Right.
And its verses should be understood within their historical and literary context.
So it's a reminder that how we interpret these texts plays a huge role in how we understand them. What other viewpoints do the sources present?
Another perspective emphasizes the importance of not taking these verses literally,
Okay.
but appreciating how the Quran engages with the natural world. They argue that the Quran encourages observation, reflection,
Right.
and a sense of wonder about creation.
So even if we don't see these verses as straight-up scientific statements, they can still inspire us to appreciate the beauty and complexity of the universe.
Exactly. And it's important to note that even within the Muslim community, there are diverse interpretations of these verses.
Right.
Some emphasize literal scientific accuracy,
Yeah.
while others focus on those broader metaphorical meanings and the invitation to contemplate the wonders of creation.
It seems like there's room for individual understanding and interpretation.
Definitely. And that's what makes this topic so engaging. It sparks discussions, encourages us to think critically about the relationship between faith and reason,
Yeah.
and in the end, to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Speaking of discussion, one of the sources digs deeper into the linguistic miracles of the Quran, specifically mentioning the use of the word daf, meaning weakness, in Surah Ar-Rum.
Right.
Can you talk more about that example?
Sure. So the word daf appears 3 times in this surah. And in linguistics, if a word that's not clearly defined is repeated multiple times,
Okay.
it hints at different meanings.
Interesting. How do scholars interpret those different meanings of daf in this context?
So the first daf describes the human when it's still a nutfa, the fertilized egg.
Okay.
It points to the fragility and vulnerability of life at its very beginning,
Yeah.
totally dependent on its environment to survive.
It's like highlighting the miraculous journey of human development, starting from such a delicate and vulnerable state.
Yeah.
What about the second death?
That one refers to childhood,
Oh.
a time when humans still rely heavily on their caregivers for physical and emotional support.
Mm.
It's a time of weakness, physically and mentally, but also a time of huge growth and learning.
It acknowledges that we all go through those different stages of development
Right.
and depend on others at various points in our lives.
Exactly. And the third, daf, refers to aging
Okay.
when health declines, and we become more dependent again on others for care.
It's fascinating how the Quran uses this one word, daf, to encompass these different stages of being human from start to finish.
Yeah, it's a great example of the linguistic depth and nuance of the Quran.
Mm.
And this connects to the broader idea of the Quran's eloquence and its impact on the Arabic language.
I'd love to learn more about that. What do the sources say about the Quran's influence on Arabic?
They talk about how the Quran's style and structure captivated even those who weren't initially open to its message.
Wow.
Its rhythm, rhyme, and rhetorical devices were so different from anything they'd heard before. It really inspired awe and wonder.
So the Quran itself, beyond its content, is seen as a miraculous literary achievement.
Exactly. Its eloquence and beauty were key to the spread of Islam and the development of Arabic literature. It became a model for poetry, prose, religious discourse, shaping the language in profound ways.
It's amazing to think that a text revealed so long ago can still have such a lasting effect on language and culture.
Yeah, it shows the power of words and the timeless nature of the Quran's message.
Right.
And for many, this linguistic mastery is further proof of its divine origin.
Okay, let's go back to those mathematical miracles for a minute.
Sure.
Can you give a specific example of a numerical pattern that some find significant?
One of the most commonly cited examples is that the words dunya, meaning world,
Yeah.
and akhira, meaning afterlife, appear the exact same number of times in the Quran.
That's a pretty striking observation. How do scholars interpret this numerical balance?
They see it as a deliberate emphasis on the equal importance of both realms.
Okay.
The Quran doesn't just focus on the afterlife or dismiss this worldly life.
Right.
Instead, it emphasizes that both are connected and that we need to live righteously to prepare for what comes after.
It's like the Quran is reminding us to balance our worldly pursuits with our spiritual aspirations.
Precisely. And another interesting example is that the phrase establish prayer is repeated 5 times in the Quran, matching the 5 daily prayers in Islam.
It's almost as if this numerical pattern underscores how important these rituals are. What other numerical patterns have scholars found?
Some have looked at the frequency of certain words related to different themes.
Okay.
For example, the word Rama, meaning mercy, appears much more often than the word adhab, meaning punishment. This emphasizes God's attribute of mercy and compassion.
It's fascinating how these numerical analyses can give us insights into the Quran's message.
Right.
And highlight key theological ideas.
It really shows the depth and complexity of the Quran, a text that keeps revealing new layers of meaning and inspiring reflection even after centuries of study.
It's amazing how these ancient texts can still spark these discussions and, get people thinking even after all this time. But I think it's important to bring it back to our listener. What does all this talk about scientific miracles in the Quran actually mean for someone who's engaging with these ideas for the first time?
That's a really good question. I think it ultimately comes down to perspective.
Okay.
For some people, these connections between the Quran and scientific discoveries could strengthen their faith.
Right.
They might see it as proof of divine inspiration, like a confirmation of their beliefs and, evidence of the truth of the Quran.
So for those who already approach the Quran with a sense of faith, these scientific links might deepen their conviction.
Exactly. But then for others, it might just highlight how the Quran interacts with the natural world and how it encourages observation and reflection.
Yeah.
They might see it as a testament to just human capacity for knowledge and understanding, regardless of their religious beliefs.
It's like these scientific miracles could be a point of connection, almost a bridge between faith and reason.
Yeah, I like that. I think at the end of the day, it's up to each person to decide what these correlations mean for them. It's not really about, proving or disproving anything. It's more about creating a space for dialogue and contemplation.
It reminds us that knowledge and understanding are always evolving, and that, the place where faith and science meet can be this really fertile ground for exploration and discovery.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important takeaway for our listener.
Yeah.
These scientific miracles in the Quran aren't meant to be taken as like definitive scientific pronouncements.
Right.
Instead, they're an invitation to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to consider different viewpoints.
So it's about approaching these ideas in a thoughtful and, nuanced way, recognizing that there are complexities and that there's room for multiple interpretations.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It pushes us to look beyond simple answers
Right.
and embrace the mystery and wonder of the universe. It encourages us to keep exploring, to keep learning, and to stay open to new perspectives.
So for our listener who's just had this, whirlwind tour of scientific miracles in the Quran, what's a final thought-provoking question they can ponder as they continue exploring on their own?
I think a really good question to consider is this. Do these scientific connections actually make someone's faith stronger? Or do they simply show that the Quran was engaging with the natural world? It's a question that doesn't have a right or wrong answer,
Right.
but it definitely encourages reflection and personal interpretation.
It's a question that can lead to more investigation and a deeper understanding of how faith, reason, and our ever-changing view of the universe all fit together.
Precisely. And for anyone wanting to delve deeper, there are lots of resources out there.
Oh, for sure.
Checking out online platforms like the Hafizan Academy, which offers Quran class, or exploring scholarly works on Quranic miracles can give people even richer insights and perspectives.
It's a journey of discovery that can stimulate the mind and enrich the spirit.
Absolutely. Ultimately, I think that's what makes this exploration so worthwhile.
Yeah.
It challenges us to engage with both our intellect and our spirit, to understand ourselves better, to understand the world around us better, and to grapple with the mysteries that are, bigger than us.
It reminds us that seeking knowledge is a lifelong journey, and that where faith and science intersect, we can find profound insights and a sense of wonder that transcends, time and culture.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring Islamic stories and content.